The Zephyrian Archive's forbidden files existed for a reason. They contained knowledge deemed too dangerous for the general public, accounts of cosmic horrors best left undiscovered, and records of entities whose very existence threatened the galactic status quo. Among these files, none was more terrifying than the dossier on the entity known as the Void Reaper. Dr. Mara Lynn knew the legends well. She had spent the better part of her career studying apex predators across 17 star systems. But the Void Reaper was something else entirely. According to the sparse accounts, it was a creature of absolute darkness, capable of phasing through solid matter, with an insatiable hunger that had reportedly devoured entire planetary ecosystems. The last confirmed sighting had been over a century ago, when the mining colony on Procyon 4 went dark. The investigation team found nothing but empty habitats and bloodless corpses. Now, as Mara stared out the reinforced viewport of her laboratory on Aurelia Prime, she couldn't help but feel a disconnection between her sterile, controlled environment and the chaotic frontier world beyond. Aurelia Prime was the definition of a fringe world, technically under Galactic Confederacy jurisdiction, but practically lawless. Its cities had sprung up around valuable mineral deposits with little planning or governance, creating a patchwork of gleaming corporate compounds and sprawling slums. Her lab was a stark contrast to all of that. White walls, climate-controlled chambers, and the gentle hum of sophisticated equipment. Mara had originally come to Aurelia Prime as a xenobiologist, but after publishing her controversial thesis on non-humanoid intelligence, she had been quietly reassigned to the position of archivist. It was a bureaucratic way of shelving her without formally admitting they considered her work dangerous. System alert. The AI assistant's voice interrupted her thoughts. Priority transmission incoming. Mara turned from the viewport, straightening her regulation uniform out of habit. Accept transmission. The holographic display flickered, and the stern face of Admiral Voss materialized. His silver hair was cut in the same severe military style he'd worn since Mara had studied under him at the academy 20 years ago. Dr. Lin, he said without preamble, his voice tight with urgency, we have a situation. Mara's spine stiffened. Admiral Voss didn't make social calls. What kind of situation, Admiral? The kind that requires absolute discretion. He lowered his voice. We've received multiple reports from Aurelia Prime's capital, descriptions that match the Void Reaper. The air seemed to leave the room. That's impossible, Mara managed. The Reaper hasn't been seen in a century. And yet, here we are. Voss's expression was grim. I'm dispatching a containment team, but they're 12 hours out. You're the only one with clearance to access the forbidden files who's already on site. Mara felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. What are my orders? Locate it, gather intelligence, do not engage. Voss's image leaned closer. This isn't a research opportunity. Dr. Lin, this is a Class Omega threat. If the Reaper is truly on Aurelia Prime, we may need to consider planetary quarantine protocols. The implications made Mara's blood run cold. Planetary quarantine was a euphemism for orbital bombardment, millions of lives at stake. I'll begin immediately, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The safety of the Galactic Confederacy depends on it. Voss's image flickered. Sending you all reported sightings now. Voss out. As the transmission ended, Mara stood frozen in the suddenly oppressive silence of her lab. Then her training kicked in. She moved to her terminal and began to access the forbidden files with her security clearance. If she was going to hunt the galaxy's most feared predator, she needed to know everything. The file was mostly redacted, even with her clearance level, but what remained painted a chilling picture. The Void Reaper had no confirmed origin point. It simply appeared throughout history, leaving devastation in its wake. Some accounts described it as shadow-given form, others as a creature with countless limbs and eyes that absorbed light. The only consistent detail was the trail of empty, lifeless habitats it left behind. Mira downloaded the file to her secure tablet and began assembling what she would need. Her scientific mind was already formulating a plan. she would need to deploy tracking drones programmed to detect the unique energy signature that all accounts associated with the Reaper, a particular distortion in the electromagnetic spectrum. She requisitioned a field kit from the research station's supply depot and arranged for a transport to take her to the capital city. Every moment counted now. Whatever the Void Reaper was, it had never stayed in one place for long. The bureaucracy of Aurelia Prime's research outpost proved more challenging than expected. Her requisition for tracking drones was flagged for review. Apparently, deploying surveillance equipment in civilian areas required 3 separate authorizations and a 48-hour waiting period. "I don't have 48 hours," Mara told the requisitions officer, a nervous man who seemed more concerned with proper form filing than the potential end of all life on the planet. "Regulations are clear, Dr. Lin," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "I can't bypass the safety protocols without authorization from Central Command." Mara leaned across the desk. "This is a direct order from Admiral Voss of the Science Division. I can have him contact your superiors if you'd prefer." The mention of Voss's name worked wonders. Within an hour, Mara had her tracking drones and was boarding a shuttle to the capital. As the shuttle rose above the research compound, she watched the ordered grid of the scientific community give way to the sprawling chaos of Aurelia Prime's main settlement. From above, the city was a study in contrasts. The corporate sector gleamed with polished metal and glass, its buildings reaching toward the sky like the aspirations of its occupants. Surrounding it, like a sea of humanity around an island of privilege, spread the slums, ramshackle structures built from salvaged materials, lit by the garish neon of cheaply manufactured signs advertising everything from food to less savory entertainments. The shuttle touched down at the central transport hub, and Mara stepped out into the cacophony of the capital. The air was thick with the smells of street food, industrial exhaust, and too many bodies in too little space. She clutched her field kit tighter and made her way through the crowd, following the coordinates of the first reported sighting. It had happened near the market district, where a vendor claimed to have seen a shadow that moved against the light, slipping between stalls. The second report came from the entertainment sector, where a group of off-duty miners swore they saw something blacker than the space between stars cross an alley. The third and most detailed report was from a sanitation worker who described a creature like a cat made of darkness, disappearing into the drainage system. Mira set up her first drone near the drainage access point and calibrated it to scan for the energy distortion pattern. As she worked, she became aware of curious stares from passers-by. Her research uniform marked her as an outsider here, someone from the clean, ordered world of the compound, venturing where she didn't belong. She deployed the remaining drones at strategic points around the area of the sightings, creating a net that would alert her to any matching energy signatures. Then she found a small cafe with outdoor seating where she could monitor the feeds on her tablet while maintaining a view of the street. Hours passed with no results. The drones detected various energy anomalies, mostly from poorly shielded power generators and the occasional piece of smuggled tech, but nothing that matched the Reaper's signature. Mara's scientific mind began to question the reports. Mass hysteria was not uncommon on frontier worlds, where isolation and harsh conditions often led to shared delusions. Just as she was considering relocating her search grid, her tablet chimed. One of the drones had picked up a faint but matching energy pattern. Mara's pulse quickened as she examined the reading. It was coming from a residential zone in the heart of the slums, and it wasn't moving. According to the data, the signature had been stable for at least 3 hours. That didn't match any known behavior pattern of the Void Reaper. The entity was constantly on the move, never staying in one place long enough to be tracked. Either this was a false positive, or the Reaper was doing something unprecedented. Night had fallen by the time Mara made her way into the slums. The neon lights of the main thoroughfares gave way to dimmer, more haphazard illumination, jury-rigged street lamps, and the glow from uncurtained windows. The buildings here were a chaotic blend of prefabricated units and improvised additions, stacked atop one another in defiance of both gravity and safety regulations. The drone's signal led her to a particularly dense cluster of dwellings. As she approached, her equipment began to malfunction, the screen flickering with static. That was consistent with the Reaper's reported effect on technology, another point of evidence that made Mira's skin crawl with both fear and scientific excitement. She was so focused on her tablet that she didn't notice the figure until they collided. Mara stumbled back, nearly dropping her equipment, and found herself face to face with a woman about her own age, with dark skin and eyes that reflected the neon lights like pools of oil. "You're a long way from the compound." "Compound," the woman said, using the local slang for the research scientists. "Lost?" Mara straightened, trying to project authority she didn't feel. "Official business. I need to access that building." She gestured toward the source of the signal. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh. And what's so interesting about my home that brings science division knocking?" Mara hesitated. "This complicated things. Your home?" "For the past 5 years." The woman crossed her arms. "Serena Vale. Former engineer on the colony ships, current maintenance tech for whoever can pay. And you are?" "Dr. Mara Lin, Xenobiology Division." Mara decided that partial truth was better than an obvious lie. "We've detected an unusual energy signature coming from your residence." Serena's expression shifted subtly. "Have you now? And you thought you'd just walk in and take a look around? That's not how things work in the real world. Dr. Lin." Mara felt her frustration rising. Every moment spent here was a moment the Void Reaper, if it was indeed the Reaper, could be moving, feeding, multiplying. The consequences were too dire for social niceties. "Ms. Vale, I don't think you understand the gravity of—" "Oh, I understand gravity just fine." Serena cut her off. "I also understand trespassing, privacy rights, and the fact that you compound types only come down here when there's something you want or something you're afraid of." She tilted her head. "So, which is it?" Mara weighed her options. Full disclosure was against protocol, but she needed access to that building. "Something we're afraid of," she admitted. "Potentially very dangerous. I need to verify if it's in your home or if our readings are mistaken." Serena studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Well, at least you're honest. Come on, then. But whatever tech you're planning to set up needs my approval first. I've got sensitive equipment in there." Relief flooded through Mara. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Serena warned as she led the way toward a narrow staircase attached to the side of the building. "You haven't told me what we're looking for." Mara followed, carefully navigating the steps that seemed too flimsy to support her weight. "It's classified," she said lamely. Serena snorted. "Everything's classified with you people. Is it going to explode, leak radiation, turn us inside out?" "Nothing like that," Mara assured her, though she wasn't entirely certain. The Void Reaper's capabilities were largely theoretical. "It's a biological entity." "You mean like a pet?" Serena reached a landing and unlocked a reinforced door, surprisingly sophisticated security for the slums. "Because the only biological entity in my place is Shadowpaw. And he's harmless. Mostly." Mara froze. "Shadowpaw?" "My cat," Serena said casually, pushing the door open. "Well, not exactly a cat, but close enough." Alarm bells rang in Mara's mind as she followed Serena into the apartment. The space was surprisingly neat and well-appointed. One wall was lined with salvaged tech equipment, communications arrays, sensor modules, and parts Mara couldn't immediately identify. The rest of the space was modestly furnished with items that looked handmade or carefully selected from discards. And there, curled on a cushion in the center of the room, was the most terrifying predator the galaxy had ever known. Mara's breath caught in her throat. The creature was smaller than she'd imagined, about the size of a Terran house cat, but unmistakable. Its body seemed to be made of living shadow, absorbing the light around it. As it turned to look at them, Mara saw eyes like tiny collapsed stars, pinpricks of intense gravitational distortion that should not exist in natural biology. It was the Void Reaper, and it was wearing a collar with a small silver bell. "That's," Mara began, her voice strangled. "Shadowpaw," Serena finished, walking over to the creature and, to Mara's horror, scratching it behind what appeared to be ears. The entity arched into the touch like any domesticated feline. I found him about 6 months ago, half-starved and hissing at everything that moved. Mara remained frozen by the door, her hand inching toward the emergency beacon on her belt. Ms. Vale, you need to step away from that creature immediately. Serena looked up, frowning. Why? What's wrong with him? That's not a cat or any known species. That's... Mara stopped, uncertain how to explain that the galaxy's most feared predator was purring on a cushion. That entity is extremely dangerous. It's responsible for the extinction of entire colonies. Serena looked down at the creature, which had rolled onto its back, exposing a belly that seemed to shimmer with cosmic darkness. This little guy? You're joking. I assure you, I am not. Mara edged closer, tablet extended. The readings were off the scale now. The energy pattern was a perfect match. That creature is known as the Void Reaper. It's a Class Omega threat. Serena's expression hardened. So that's why you're here, to take him away, to study him or dissect him, or whatever it is you people do. The standard protocol for a Class Omega threat is immediate neutralization, Mara said, her scientific training taking over as she recited the regulation. But I need to contact my superiors first and confirm. She was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Both women turned to see a small drone hovering outside the now shattered window, military grade, not one of Mara's scientific models. What the hell? Serena started toward it, but Mara grabbed her arm. Wait, that's not mine, that's... The apartment door burst open, and armed figures in Galactic Confederacy uniforms poured in, weapons raised. At their center stood Admiral Voss, his face set in grim determination. Step away from the entity, he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. Both of you. The Void Reaper, Shadowpaw, had leapt to its feet at the intrusion, back arched and emitting a sound like static electricity. The collar's bell jingled discordantly. Admiral, Mara began, stepping forward. I can explain. There's nothing to explain. Dr. Lin. Voss cut her off. We've been monitoring your drone feeds. The entity matches all parameters. Containment protocol is in effect. He gestured to his soldiers. Neutralize it. No. Serena moved to stand between the soldiers and the creature. You can't just come in here and kill him. Voss's expression didn't change. Move aside, civilian. That is not a pet. It is a threat to all life on this planet. Mara found herself caught in the middle, her scientific mind racing. The Void Reaper's behavior defied everything in the forbidden files. It should be aggressive, predatory, insatiable. Not wearing a bell collar and hissing defensively from a cushion. Admiral, she said carefully, I believe there may be more to this situation than we understood. The entity's behavior is inconsistent with all historical accounts. Irrelevant, Voss replied. The risk is too great. We have confirmation of the energy signature. We have visual confirmation. The protocol is clear. One of the soldiers raised a weapon, a molecular disruptor designed to break down matter at the atomic level. Serena tensed, clearly preparing to physically defend the creature. In that moment, Mara made a decision that would change her career and possibly the galaxy's understanding of apex predators forever. She stepped in front of Serena, directly in the line of fire. Dr. Lin, Voss said, his voice dangerous. You are interfering with a Class Omega containment protocol. Step aside. No, sir, Mara replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. As the ranking xenobiologist, I am invoking Scientific Directive 35B. Voss's eyes narrowed. There is no Scientific Directive 35B. Yes, there is, Mara countered. It states that in cases where a supposedly hostile entity displays behavior that fundamentally contradicts established parameters, a full scientific investigation takes precedence over containment protocols. It was a bluff, and a transparent one at that, but it gave her the few seconds she needed. Look at it, Admiral, she said, gesturing to the creature, which had retreated behind Serena's legs. Does that look like the entity that decimated Procyon 4? It's wearing a bell, for Galaxy's sake. Voss hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, Mara pressed her advantage. Ms. Vale, how long have you had Shadowpaw? Serena, still tense but following Mara's lead, answered. About 6 months, found him in the drainage tunnels. He was injured, something had taken a chunk out of his side. Wouldn't let anyone near him at first. And how did you gain his trust? Mara asked, maintaining eye contact with Voss even as she spoke to Serena. Food, Serena said simply. Left it out for him every day, then started staying closer while he ate. Eventually, he let me touch him. Now he sleeps on my bed. Mara turned back to Voss. Admiral, we're witnessing something unprecedented. The Void Reaper, one of the most feared entities in galactic history, has been effectively domesticated through sustained positive interaction and feeding. Voss's expression remained skeptical, but the molecular disruptor had lowered slightly. That's not possible. 6 months ago, I would have agreed with you, Mara said. But the evidence is right in front of us. This entity has cohabitated with Ms. Vale without incident. It displays behaviors consistent with domestication, seeking affection, tolerating a collar, responding to a name. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds. Then, unexpectedly, the creature, Shadowpaw, moved. It padded forward, still wary of the soldiers but apparently responding to something else. As they watched, it approached Serena and rubbed against her legs, making that strange static electricity sound that Mara now realized was its version of purring. I've been feeding him twice a day, Serena said, her voice softer now. Regular schedule. He knows it's about time for dinner. The simple domesticity of the statement seemed to throw Voss more than any scientific argument could have. The feared Void Reaper, terror of the galaxy, waiting for its scheduled mealtime. This changes nothing, Voss said, but his tone lacked conviction. The entity could be manipulating her, playing a long game. Or, Mara countered, we could be witnessing an evolutionary adaptation. Consider the pattern. Admiral, the Void Reaper appears throughout history, consuming resources and moving on. But what if that behavior wasn't pure predation? What if it was searching for something? You're anthropomorphizing, Voss accused. I'm hypothesizing, Mara corrected. And I'm requesting time to test that hypothesis. Give me 72 hours to study the entity's behavior in this environment. If I find any evidence of deception or danger, I'll authorize neutralization myself. Voss looked from Mara to Serena to the creature, which was now sitting and grooming itself, seemingly oblivious to the weapons trained on it. 24 hours, he finally said. And I'm leaving a containment team outside. If that thing so much as hisses wrong, they have orders to level this entire building. Mara nodded, relief flooding through her. Understood, Admiral. Voss turned to leave, then paused. Dr. Lin, if you're wrong about this, if that thing is playing us, the consequences will be on your head. I understand the risk, Mara replied, but I also understand the potential discovery. If we can domesticate the Void Reaper, imagine what that means for our understanding of all apex predators. After the soldiers withdrew, Serena collapsed onto her sofa, visibly shaken. They were going to kill him, just like that. Mira sat across from her, watching the creature. She couldn't quite bring herself to call it Shadowpaw yet, as it returned to its cushion. You have to understand, the entity you've been caring for has a violent history. The accounts of its destructive capabilities are extensive. He eats synthesized protein and fish scraps from the market, Serena said defensively. And sometimes he brings me dead rats, which is gross but hardly the end of civilization. Mira leaned forward, fascinated despite herself. Ms. Vale. Serena, if we're going to spend 24 hours together because you convinced Star Command not to vaporize my cat, you might as well use my name. Serena, Mira amended. I need to understand exactly how you tamed the Void Reaper. Every detail could be scientifically significant. Serena sighed and got up, moving to a small food preparation area. I told you, I found him injured in the tunnels. He was this shadow thing that hissed and tried to scratch me when I got close. But he was hurt and didn't move very fast. She began preparing what looked like a mixture of protein paste and small fish. I left food for him. He wouldn't eat while I was watching at first, but he was willing to eat what you provided. Mara noted, recording the information on her tablet. That suggests he's an opportunistic feeder, not specialized for a particular food source. Yeah, well, hungry beats picky, Serena said with a shrug. After about a week, he'd wait until I was a few meters away before eating. Then he started letting me stay closer. Then one day, he let me touch him. Her expression softened at the memory. His fur, if that's what it is, feels like running your hand through cool water, but solid somehow. Mara made notes, her scientific curiosity fully engaged now. And the collar? That was about 2 months in. He started following me home, staying longer each time. I thought a collar with a bell would help me keep track of him. Wasn't sure he'd tolerate it, but he didn't seem to mind. Serena placed the food mixture in a shallow dish on the floor. Shadow Paw, dinner! The creature's head lifted, those star-like eyes focusing on Serena. Then, with the casual entitlement of all domesticated felines across the galaxy, it stretched languidly before padding over to the food dish. Mira watched, transfixed, as the terror of countless worlds delicately began to eat its dinner. May I scan him while he's eating? She asked, already reaching for her equipment. Serena nodded. Just don't get too close. He doesn't like strangers near his food. Mira kept a respectful distance as she activated the scanner. The readings were fascinating. The entity's energy signature fluctuated as it consumed the food, suggesting some form of metabolic process. That alone was a revolutionary discovery. Previous theories had suggested the Void Reaper fed on energy directly, not physical matter. Have you noticed any unusual behavior? Mara asked. Disappearances in the neighborhood? Technology malfunctioning more than usual? Serena gave her a sharp look. You still think he's dangerous? I think I need data, Mara corrected. Everything we thought we knew about this entity is being challenged by what I'm seeing. That's both exciting and concerning. Well, the only things that have disappeared are the rats he hunts. And he did short out my comm link once when he decided to sleep on it. Serena watched the creature eat with obvious affection. He's just a cat, Dr. Lin, a weird, space shadow cat. But a cat. Mara wasn't convinced it was that simple, but she had to admit the evidence before her eyes was compelling. The feared Void Reaper was behaving exactly like a domesticated pet. It had established a routine with Serena, showed affection, and exhibited no signs of the insatiable hunger or destruction detailed in the forbidden files. What if the historical accounts were wrong? Or what if they were missing a crucial piece of context? The next 24 hours were a revelation for Mara. She observed Shadowpaw's behavior, took countless readings, and engaged in long conversations with Serena about the creature's habits and preferences. The more she learned, the more her scientific understanding was forced to evolve. Shadowpaw slept for nearly 14 hours, curled either on his cushion or, more frequently, on Serena's bed. When awake, he explored the apartment, played with makeshift toys Serena had fashioned from spare parts, and occasionally stared out the window at the bustle of the slums below. Most significantly, he showed clear attachment to Serena. He would follow her around the apartment, rubbing against her legs and soliciting pets and scratches. When she sat on the sofa, he would leap into her lap and knead at her with paws that seemed to phase slightly through solid matter, the only visible evidence of his otherworldly nature, aside from his appearance. The records describe the Void Reaper as a solitary predator. Mara noted as she watched Shadowpaw purr in Serena's lap. But he's displaying classic social bonding behaviors. Maybe he was just lonely, Serena suggested, stroking the creature gently. Maybe all those colonies it supposedly destroyed. What if it was just looking for someone to feed it and pet it? The idea was absurdly simple. Yet Mara couldn't dismiss it entirely. What if the Void Reaper's destructive behavior had been misunderstood? What if its appearances throughout history had been attempts to find sustenance and, perhaps, companionship? As the deadline approached, Mara prepared her report for Admiral Voss. She included all her observations, readings, and a series of recordings showing Shadowpaw engaging in typical pet behaviors. She concluded with a recommendation: instead of neutralization, the Galactic Confederacy should establish a monitored study of interspecies domestication, with Serena and Shadowpaw as the primary subjects. When Voss arrived, his expression made it clear he expected to find evidence supporting immediate neutralization. Instead, he was greeted by the sight of the Void Reaper batting at a small mechanical toy Serena had built, its bell jingling cheerfully. "Your report is unconventional, Dr. Lin," he said stiffly after reviewing her findings. "So is the situation, Admiral," Mara replied. "Every observation I've made suggests that the entity known as the Void Reaper is capable of peaceful coexistence when its basic needs are met. Ms. Vale has effectively domesticated what we thought was an unstoppable predator." Voss watched the creature warily. "And you believe this domestication is stable?" "All evidence suggests so. For 6 months, the entity has lived here without incident. It shows clear attachment to Ms. Vale and has established routines consistent with domestication." "And you're certain it's the same entity described in the Forbidden Files?" Voss pressed. "Not some related species with similar energy readings?" Mara hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "I can't be 100% certain without comparative genetic sampling, which doesn't exist for the Void Reaper, but the energy signature is an exact match to the historical records." Voss sighed heavily. "I don't like this, Dr. Lin. The risk assessment is incalculable." "With respect, Admiral, so is the potential knowledge gain," Mara countered. "If we can understand how Ms. Vale successfully domesticated the Void Reaper, we might be able to apply similar principles to other hostile species. It could revolutionize our approach to xenobiology." Serena, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. "You know I'm still here, right? And this is still my home, and Shadowpaw is still my cat. I'm not agreeing to any experiments or tests that might hurt him." Voss turned to her with a mixture of frustration and bewilderment. "Ms. Vale, you must understand that if this entity decided to revert to its historical behavior patterns, it could destroy this entire settlement in a matter of hours." "But he hasn't," Serena pointed out. "For 6 months, he's been here, eating regular meals, sleeping on my bed, and purring when I scratch his ears. Those sound like pretty stable behavior patterns to me." Mara saw the moment Voss's resolve began to crumble. The Admiral looked from the peaceful creature to his armed soldiers, then back to Mara. 72 hours, he finally said. "I'm withdrawing the strike team, but establishing a perimeter monitoring system. If there's any change in the entity's behavior, any sign of aggression or increased energy signatures, I'll have a neutralization team here within minutes." "That's acceptable," Mara agreed quickly, before he could change his mind. "I'll continue my observations and submit daily reports." After Voss left, Serena turned to Mara with raised eyebrows. "So I'm guessing you'll be sticking around." "If that's all right with you," Mara said. "This is an unprecedented scientific opportunity." "Uh-huh." Serena crossed her arms. "And when your 72 hours are up, what then? You and Star Command just leave us alone." Mara hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know what would happen after the observation period. The Galactic Confederacy had strict protocols for dealing with dangerous entities, and let it live as someone's pet wasn't among the approved options. "I can't promise that," she admitted. "But I can promise to advocate for a solution that respects both the scientific importance of this discovery and your relationship with Shadowpaw." Serena studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then, Dr. Lin, you can stay, but you sleep on the sofa. And you don't wake me up with your scanning equipment at night." Mara smiled, feeling a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to release. Deal. And please, call me Mara. The 72 hours stretched into a week. Then 2. Mara's reports to Admiral Voss became increasingly detailed, documenting every aspect of Shadowpaw's behavior and physiology that she could observe without invasive testing. She noted his sleep patterns, his apparent preference for certain foods, and most importantly, his consistent social bonding with Serena. To her surprise, Voss didn't order her to return to the research compound. Instead, he requested more specific information about the domestication process and any signs of the entity's abilities described in the forbidden files. He wants to know if Shadowpaw can still phase through solid matter, Mara told Serena as they shared a meal one evening. Apparently, there are accounts of the Void Reaper passing through containment fields and reinforced bulkheads. Serena snorted. He gets stuck in the bathroom when I close the door. I don't think intergalactic containment is going to be a problem. Over the days, Mara found herself settling into an unexpected routine. During the day, she would conduct her observations and write her reports. In the evenings, she and Serena would talk, sharing meals and stories. Mara told Serena about her studies at the academy, her fascination with apex predators, and her frustration at being sidelined as an archivist. Serena shared her experiences as a colony ship engineer, her decision to settle on Aurelia Prime when the corporation went bankrupt, and her life in the slums. And through it all, Shadowpaw moved between them, sometimes playing, sometimes sleeping, occasionally fixing them with those star-like eyes that seemed to contain universes. You know, Serena said one night as they watched the creature chase a point of light she was projecting on the wall. I think he was dying when I found him. Mara looked up from her notes. What makes you say that? The injury on his side was bad, and he was so thin, thinner than he is now, and you can barely see him from certain angles as it is. Serena directed the light up the wall, and Shadowpaw leapt impossibly high to catch it. I think that's why he let me help him. He didn't have a choice. Mara considered this. That would explain the deviation from all historical behavior patterns, physical vulnerability forcing adaptation. Or maybe, Serena suggested, he was always adaptable, but no one ever tried to help him before. Everyone just saw a monster. The idea resonated with Mara more than she expected. How much of xenobiology was colored by fear? How many species had been classified as threats simply because no one had approached them with anything but weapons and containment fields? As the days passed, she found herself spending less time with her scanning equipment and more time simply observing Shadowpaw with her own eyes. She noticed things the equipment couldn't detect, the way his purring changed pitch when he was particularly content, how he would bring small objects to Serena as if offering gifts, the way he would sometimes sit and stare at the stars through the window with what looked remarkably like longing. On the 15th day of her stay, Mara received a priority transmission from Admiral Voss. The Science Division has reviewed your findings, he said, his expression giving nothing away. They've made a decision regarding the entity. Mara tensed. She had known this was coming, but she had hoped for more time. What's the decision, Admiral? The entity is to be classified as a monitored xenobiological specimen, Voss stated formally. It will remain in its current habitat under observation for a minimum of 1 standard year. Ms. Vale will be compensated as a civilian contractor for the Xenobiology Division. Relief flooded through Mara. That's unexpected. Thank you, Admiral. Voss's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Lin. This arrangement comes with conditions. You are being permanently reassigned to Aurelia Prime as the lead researcher on this project. Your primary residence will be relocated to the civilian sector to facilitate daily observation. Mara blinked in surprise. You're stationing me in the slums? We're establishing a new research outpost in the civilian sector, Voss corrected. With Ms. Vale's residence as the focal point, the official story will be urban development research. The true nature of your work remains classified. After the transmission ended, Mara sat in stunned silence. It wasn't the outcome she had expected. It was better. The Void Reaper would be studied rather than destroyed. Serena would be protected rather than displaced, and Mara herself would have the opportunity to continue the most fascinating research of her career. When she told Serena the news, the engineer's reaction was characteristically pragmatic. "So they're paying me to keep my cat," she summarized. "And you're moving in next door to watch us." "Essentially, yes," Mara confirmed. "Is that acceptable?" Serena shrugged. "Beats having Star Command bust down my door to vaporize Shadow Paw." She reached down to stroke the creature, who was curled against her side. "Besides, I've gotten used to having you around. You're not bad company for a compound type." Mara smiled. "You're not bad company either, for a slum dweller." 3 months later, Mara stood in her new office, reviewing the latest data from her expanded research team. The Urban Development Outpost had been established in a renovated building adjacent to Serena's apartment, with state-of-the-art monitoring equipment disguised as ordinary fixtures and furnishings. The Void Reaper, officially designated Specimen VS1, but still called Shadowpaw by everyone involved, had shown no signs of reverting to the destructive behavior described in the historical records. Instead, it continued to display all the characteristics of a domesticated companion animal, with some unique abilities that Mara's team was carefully documenting. It could, in fact, phase through certain materials, but not all. And the ability seemed limited by factors they were still trying to understand. It could manipulate shadows in ways that defied conventional physics, sometimes using them to hide or to create interesting patterns that Mara suspected were a form of play or communication. And its star-like eyes could see spectrums of light invisible to most species, allowing it to navigate perfectly in complete darkness. But most significantly, it showed unmistakable emotional attachment to Serena. It greeted her when she returned home, sought her attention when it wanted affection, and displayed what could only be described as concern when she was upset or unwell. As Mara watched through the monitoring system, Shadowpaw jumped onto Serena's lap as she worked on repairing some piece of salvaged tech. The creature curled up, its dark form contrasting with Serena's work clothes, and began to purr. Serena absently scratched behind its ears without interrupting her work, the casual intimacy of the gesture speaking volumes about their bond. Mira turned to her terminal and began to compose a new entry for the Zephyrian Archive's Forbidden Files. It would be an addendum to the file on the Void Reaper, challenging centuries of fear with new understanding. "The entity known as the Void Reaper," she wrote, "previously classified as a Class Omega threat, has demonstrated capacity for peaceful coexistence through sustained positive interaction. Historical accounts of its destructive nature may represent a misunderstanding of its fundamental needs and behaviors, or may reflect environmental factors not present in its current circumstances. Most significantly, the entity has formed a stable social bond with a human caregiver, displaying behaviors consistent with domestication. This suggests that even the most feared predators may be capable of transformation through kindness and care, a principle that could revolutionize our approach to supposedly hostile species throughout the galaxy. The apex predator that once terrorized galaxies now sleeps on her bed and eats from her hand. And in doing so, it has taught us more about the nature of predation, adaptation, and connection than a century of conventional research." Mara paused, looking at the monitor where Serena was now holding Shadowpaw up to examine her repair work, as if seeking the creature's approval. The Void Reaper batted playfully at a dangling wire, its bell jingling. She added a final line to her report. "It seems that sometimes the difference between a monster and a companion is simply the willingness to offer kindness instead of fear."